This week is Bereaved Parents Week, and I'm a bereaved mother. I think that's probably what has guided my career and led me to being a bereavement-specialist nurse. I was exposed to child death from a young age when my cousin died suddenly and unexpectedly, and witnessed as a young child the heartache and devastation that left within our family. She had siblings, and one of her siblings at the time was really young. Everything shifted in their family as a result of her death. And in that shift, I kind of stepped into a role of being the big sister for her younger sibling. And I think that was my first experience of, from a really young age, acknowledging how relationships change through grief and loss. Some of those relationships can be beautiful, meaningful, and unexpected. And also the importance of relationships and connectedness in surviving grief, loss, and heartache.
Danielle, could we begin by you telling us what a bereavement and yoga specialist does?
I work at our local hospital and provide immediate bereavement support for those who need it. I support other professionals, write guidelines and policies for the hospital. I began practicing yoga as I believed it was something that helps with adaptive grief, and wanted to begin to provide a tool that will help others in their grief, that was accessible and universal and can be practiced, wherever. It reduces any inequalities with grief, and getting support. So that's been something that I started teaching yoga about 10 months ago.
What is adaptive grief?
Responding to your loss and being able to accept that your life is never going to be the same, and the existence of grief while believing that you can still have a good life, and growing around your grief, allowing yourself to still have positive experiences, but honouring your grief as well. Because ultimately, if you don't acknowledge and sit with the pain of grief, and you use mechanisms to suppress your grief, they can become mechanisms that will ultimately cause you harm in later life. And that's speaking from my own experience.
I suppose it's like integration, right?
Yeah, that's it. I think it's quite apt that we're having this conversation today, because this week is Bereaved Parents Week, and I'm a bereaved mother. I think that's probably what has guided my career and led me to being a bereavement-specialist nurse. I was exposed to child death from a young age when my cousin died suddenly and unexpectedly, and witnessed as a young child the heartache and devastation that left within our family. She had siblings, and one of her siblings at the time was really young, and everything shifted in their family as a result of her death. And in that shift, I kind of stepped into a role of being the big sister for her younger sibling. It wasn't planned, it wasn't intentional, it just happened. And I think that was my first experience of, from a really young age, acknowledging how relationships change through grief and loss. And some of those relationships can be beautiful and really meaningful and unexpected. And also the importance of relationships and connectedness in surviving grief, loss, and heartache. So I think that was my first experience of child death.
And how, just tell us, how old were you? How old was your cousin who passed, etc.?
I was 6 and she was 7.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and
So that your cousin who passed was 7, sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we were a very similar age,
Wow.
and her little sister was a toddler, and she is so special to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so special, and I know I am to her. And like I said, that we wouldn't have this relationship if her big sister didn't die. I wouldn't have moved into the role of being her big sister. So yeah, that was probably my first experience of child death. And I remember looking at my auntie, and she's such a wonderful human. But I always remember thinking, I don't want to be like her, because I could see the sadness. And then when I got older, I had a daughter, and my daughter died, and she was the one person that I used to relate to within the family. And I think talking about child death is a taboo. For me, there has felt like within our family there's been shame around child death. And I think that comes from almost like a fear of showing up as vulnerable, or it's seen as, weakness if we can't cope. And that's been masked a lot through busyness and, like superficial coping strategies. Predominantly, I would say busyness.
For yourself or on a societal level?
For myself, but I think society as well. I think that, with grief, we, even if you look at like bereavement policies and things like that, I think there is almost like a presumption from a societal level, and pressure that we put on ourselves as well, to almost heal ourselves or be okay within a certain time scale. And the reality of grief is it's lifelong. The journey never ends. The intensity changes, it ebbs and flows, but the journey of grief will never end. And I do believe that love and the connection and the relationship that you have with somebody isn't just within life, it's also after death. And that doesn't end, that enduring connection, that enduring love. And because of that, grief doesn't end. So I think, within our family, we probably didn't implement positive adaptive grief strategies. We weren't really aware. We were good at speaking, but I think those who have experienced child death have an added element of this understanding that within my family, she wasn't the only child deaf, unfortunately. That has enabled us to share and normalise some of the complexities of our own grief and how we were feeling. And they ultimately have been a survival guide to be able to be honest and share the rawness of grief.
Would you mind just telling us a little bit more about your daughter and the circumstances and around that time?
Yeah, so I think as well, my daughter I was very young at the time. I'm from a Catholic family. So when I got pregnant, it was a shock. And I think there was taboo around that. I was a young girl out of wedlock. And then
how old were you?
I was only 19.
Okay.
And then the pregnancy was complicated. It wasn't easy. I had complications, but felt that I wanted to progress. I found out quite early on that I was having a little girl, and felt a very strong love and connection to her. And then she was born, and it was she had an upward struggle really for the whole of her life, and she died when she was 5 months old. And I don't know whether my age at the time contributed to almost a sense of unworthiness of allowing myself to grieve as well. And again, that expectation that I needed to be busy, be successful. I can't even say adapt, because I wouldn't have been that insightful that I thought, oh, I'll adapt. It would have been like, I need to get over this. I felt very, very broken. I really lost my identity, you know, from being a young teenage mum to when she died. It was a bit like, well, what now? Before I'd had her, I decided that I wanted to be a nurse. And then after she died, I thought, can I be a nurse and deal with what nurses deal with, which is end of life and death and dying? And can I do that and not almost connect every element of my care that I was providing to my own experience of death and dying? So I thought, well, you know, how can I challenge that and see if this is going to be something that I'm able to do, and, you know, take myself to university and do my nursing degree. So I went and volunteered at our local hospice to look after people that were dying. And it was a really beautiful journey. I worked with some amazing nurses. It almost gave me an outlet to be able to express a lot of love and care that I had, a lot of, you know, that maternal love and care that I didn't have anywhere to direct to. I was able to direct that towards the care that I was providing at the hospice.
Thank you for sharing that. That was yeah, there's something about death that brings a like immediate presence. Do you find, like, to a conversation? I noticed it myself then. As soon as you started opening up and talking about that, like, everything drops away. I'm just in, and I'm in my body, and I can feel like these emotions and that feeling of, it's almost, I know you listened to my conversation with Ellie, so you probably know this. Like, I've had, my life feels like it's been not as much as you, but defined somewhat by death or the fear of it, or, you know, and loss and grief and stuff, and shaped some of it. But it is an extremely powerful framing to look at life through. It's weird. It's weird how there is kind of, and I almost feel guilty saying this, like, strange beauty in it.
Oh, yeah,
Because,
definitely, yeah.
and I think most people wouldn't want to say that. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like I've never had a like a child or anything death, but it's, grandparents and people close to me or whatever, and I've often dealt with it quite well in terms of really sat with it and just tried to use it as a way to go, like, how can this be alchemized
Yeah,
to, like, make me be grateful for being alive and for having that person being in my life.
yeah,
And I guess what I'm trying to say is, then you've done that in your journey and turned it into something and gone on this journey down yourself to then help other people, and I think it's beautiful.
it's been transformative. But I think as well, when you are faced with the enormity of feelings that something really traumatic brings up, you are forced to confront aspects of yourself that maybe when you're not suffering, you wouldn't, you know, they seem to go quiet. So I think that ultimately my experiences have led me to becoming a much more spiritual person, a much more insightful person, who, you know, I'm always on my journey. I feel like I've dipped my toe in the ocean, you know, to where I want to be. But yeah, I think that the complexity of grief and loss can allow you to do some of that innermost, deepest healing. And it has provided those opportunities. And I think, I'll be honest, for a long time, like I said at the beginning, that if you don't confront the pain of grief and you don't meet it and you don't sit with it, then ultimately those mechanisms that you're using for distraction can come back and be harmful. And it was only when my second daughter had a life-threatening incident and I was faced with the risk of losing her that all my unhealed wounds were opened up, all my deepest fears, all that heartache. But through that process, that really revealed the most raw reflection of love and resilience. And that was the biggest agent for change. And I don't know whether that was that I was, I don't know, in a different position, in a different stage in my life, or whether it felt so painful that I couldn't have done anything other than sit with it, because it felt physically quite debilitating. And I suppose for me as well, I'd probably used a lot of elements of like trying to control my own life to minimize loss. Because I think when you lose somebody that you love, you then develop quite a fear of losing somebody else that you love or something that you love. And this applies, I think, to death and non-death losses. You know, the loss of a relationship, the loss of a job. When we lose something, we become fearful of losing something else because that was painful, that was hard, it was messy. And so then when I was faced with that fear and that realization that it doesn't matter my circumstances, it doesn't matter what I do, I can't eliminate, nobody can turn around and say to me, you are never going to lose another child. And that realization I became face to face with, I had to surrender a lot. I had to surrender a lot of the coping strategies that were quite controlling, and yeah, I suppose carry the truth in my own body that, you know, some things will happen and you have no control over that. And I don't think that everything happens for a reason. You know, some things that happen, they happen, and they're outrageously painful and feel, you know, outrageously unfair. And I see that in my line of work that, you know, it doesn't feel that for everything there is a reason, but the power is in our response.
Control.
It's in that.
That's the one, isn't it?
Trust. Yeah, and sometimes you have no option to, because that sense of control is really quite restricting. And I think through the surrender, through that acceptance and that trust and those, you know, that adapting, that's where the transformation and the freedom begins.
How can we lessen our control over attachment to outcomes?
I think through the body. I think our mind is very, very powerful, isn't it? And the brain is very hardwired. You know, there's a lot of neuroscience and evidence behind grief theories, behind attachment, of how we have to re-hardwire the brain. And there are certain ways that we can do that. And I think one of the most effective ways to quieten the mind and to help with those new neurological pathways is accessing that through the body. So that's where yoga comes in, through yoga, through breath work, through meditation, allowing yourself to feel the pain in increments, because I think some grief and losses, your mind again is very powerful. It would be too painful. Your brain would feel like it was going to explode. So it will only allow you to process so much pain and loss at one given time. I think yoga can help you find that safe journey of feeling the pain and meeting yourself where you're at. And I suppose as well, feeling those emotions, those emotions are transmitters of information. And I think it's really important to understand how you feel. Because I think for a long time I became very disconnected and I was living in fear and survival. For a prolonged stage of my life, I've been in fear and survival. And that has a massive effect on your nervous system. So I think as well, if you use yoga as a way of calming the nervous system, turning on that parasympathetic nervous system, as a means of, training your vagus nerve and sending those messages to your brain that it's safe to feel. You're safe. And you've always got that practice as an anchor. Because I think in grief, like I say, you can feel really, really frightened. And it can be so helpful if you've got those strategies to take yourself into a place that you can connect to your breath and you can calm yourself down from the body to the mind.
I'm so excited to tell you about my first ever sponsor. Bear Bar make the highest quality shower soaps. Those of you close to me will know I'm always recommending and gifting them to people. I've actually brought some upstairs from my bathroom to show you. This one is Nebula Nightshade Fresh Cut Pine. This is one of the first ones that they made. It's got like this oaty kind of texture thing. I once described it to Christian, the founder, as like a cheese grater for my feet in a good way. Favorites are Woodsman, Molten Lather, is actually a shampoo bar, and Citrus Burst, which I've used all of that, so I don't have it. Do you remember those like packs you used to get with Pokemon cards? They're kind of like that. They stack it in your bathroom really nicely. You'll definitely dig it. Once you try these, you will never want to go back to £1.99 squeezy plastic horrible fairy liquid style soaps. Trust me, it's an absolute game changer. I don't even bother with moisturizer because I've got this fantastic quality soap and a good diet, of course. There's no plastic. It's made in the UK. Honestly, it's just a 5-star product all around. If you'd like to try Bear Bar, you can get 15% off your first order by going to bit.ly/bearjace. That's BAREJASE to get 15% off. What are some ways that people can begin a healing journey using yoga? Let's say if they've never done it before. Because sometimes, grief can, I guess, paralyze a lot of people metaphorically.
Yeah.
And, I can't do yoga. I'm not flexible. And then they're looking at stuff on YouTube and then they're not able to do downward dog. And then what are some beginner steps?
I think I would keep it really simple because exactly like you said, grief does paralyze the body, not just metaphorically. It puts us into fight, flight, or freeze. So it shifts us into thinking there's a tiger in the room and you're going to do one of those 3 things to stay alive. So it can be really difficult to move. So I would say at first just move your body, even if it's, doing some very simple neck rotations, even if it's just breathing and just rounding your shoulders and straightening up through your spine. Just begin to move your body because you'll see people in grief, and I know where my shoulders were. My shoulders were up here for years. I was tense. So just begin to soften the body. And that will be pivotal in helping people shift from that fight, flight, or freeze and start to become really present and start to feel the body. They might have been quite disconnected. So I would start really simple, and with whenever I'm teaching yoga, I always remind people that it's not about how each posture, each asana looks, and the postures are only a small element of the practice. The postures are not yoga; they are a part of the practice. People become flexible and they might become strong as a byproduct, but yoga isn't strength training; it's not a workout. So I would say to people that your practice is your practice. Don't worry about what shapes you can make. Start to notice how it feels. Yeah, start simple and allow the mat to become a sanctuary for any emotions that you want to start to process. Start to allow the mat to be a safe place for you to move your body, to feel.
I presume you do. Would you do one-on-one work with the yoga stuff as well?
Yeah, it can be tailored in individual for what people need. I would
So
never it to be for people to not come to class, because they are going to think that they're going to feel excluded or not as good as somebody else. Because I do think in grief there is, like I was saying earlier, a sense of shame, and I know I felt a little bit like damaged goods, and it definitely impacted on my self-esteem. So I wouldn't want my yoga that I teach for people to feel not good enough. I want it to be adaptable and be inclusive and be a very safe space. I tend to put some smaller classes on that I don't advertise. So if people, send me a message and say I fancy yoga, I feel drawn to doing yoga, but I feel vulnerable, then I'll tend to do a small class that's not advertised for people that might align with how they're feeling, so it can feel a very safe space.
do you offer like online stuff?
No, I haven't. This is the first time, Jason, that I'm putting myself out there and speaking online. And once this podcast goes live, I'll probably have to watch it behind a pillow, or probably never will watch it. But I made a promise to myself that I wanted to be far reaching with information, with tools, with my authenticity, to help others. Ultimately, I want to give people.
So I think
Oh, sorry, Jason.
yeah, because what I'm thinking, obviously we're local to one another, aren't we? But podcasts can be listened to anywhere in the world, and I do get some listeners from all over the place. My thoughts are, if this connects with them and they think, I'd love to speak to Danielle, I'd love to do a one-to-one session, but I'm remote, is that something you would be able to offer?
Yeah, I've promised myself in the future there will be
Putting
more.
you on the spot there, changing your complete business model, Anna,
No,
live on air.
I've promised in the future I will have more of an online presence.
Yeah, I think I think it would be useful. Um, and if not, what are some, you know, what are some things that people can Google or type into YouTube to get
Yeah,
themselves started?
there's lots of practices on YouTube. Some really excellent free content that people can access for yoga. It doesn't have to be grief specific yoga that people access. Any yoga, any breath work, any mindfulness practice will be beneficial for helping people process grief.
Mm. And any sort of, what do we think about? I'm always like from a kind of coaching lens, but I can't help it. But like, are there any sort of like cues that we should be thinking about when, let's say, someone starts, they start doing a 5-minute flow, and then maybe it's quite challenging and feels quite physical, I would imagine, am I right in saying that probably if it gets to a point where it's too difficult, you're going to then end up out of that, well, it still is presence, isn't it? But you're going to, again, does that make sense? Like if you push it too
Makes sense.
hard, you're not going to
It
be in
makes sense.
acceptance mode. Is that right?
Yeah, and I would say in yoga we practice ahimsa, like do no harm to yourself, your body, do no harm to anybody else. But also, I think it can be really powerful to tune into what your mind is telling you. So when you are practicing, a certain posture or it feels intense, it's finding that edge, and that will help build resilience as well to get you through grief. So if you're thinking like, oh, I just want to, this feels too difficult, I don't want to do this, then notice what your mind is telling you, or you can't do this, you're not capable of this, you are. And it's finding that edge. So I wouldn't want people to feel pushed and forced, but also feel capable,
Mm.
notice strength in your body, like tune into what your mind is telling you what you can't do. And you can adapt your practice as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I suppose it's an interesting similarity in like that discomfort of the position perhaps and the discomfort of grief, and
Yeah,
how much are we willing to accept,
this is it.
and
You'll know
how, yeah,
the resistance in your
yeah,
body.
like,
You will notice that, you know, your body will soften as you surrender as well. So as you, I think, let go of some of that
mm,
control, as you allow those emotions, maybe you've suppressed a lot and you hold things physiologically within the body. So as you allow yourself to process, you might find that certain areas become less resistant, less tense. But as well, I think honouring where you are on your journey. So I think it can be quite powerful that, one day we might wake up and, feel ultra strong and flexible. And the next day you feel really out of balance. And that's powerful because again, it's the postures are able to help you with that journey inwards, with that connection with how you feel. So feeling very out of balance can, in your posture, can help you observe whether you feel very out of balance emotionally, honouring, a child's pose and giving yourself that humility is essential in grief. But also you can then honour that same humility in a difficult conversation. The forcing in a forward fold can sometimes be the forcing in life that you when you're forcing something. So I think the postures teach us far more off the mat than what they teach you on
mm.
the mat as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never really thought about it like that, and I've done a fair bit of yoga like over the years, but I was thinking before this conversation about why it's a more female dominated area. Um, and I think the key there is the surrender.
Yeah,
Surrender is a feminine quality, isn't it? And I always think about ice baths, and it's kind of similar where like you get these like manly blokes who get in the ice bath and they just can't do it. Yet there's like these groups of women who are quite good at it or whatever. And I'm like, it's because of the surrender. You need to surrender to the cold water, just like you need to surrender to these positions in yoga. You can't brute force it. You can't bicep curl your way through it, you know?
yeah,
And I guess, yeah, that's probably why yoga attracts more women. I mean, I must admit, because I came to your beach session, didn't I? there's a picture on my story of me surrounded by all these women, and all these lads were messaging me going, "All right, I know what you're up to," because it's not it's not dominant. It's a very female dominated thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That wasn't much of a question. It was just a rambling.
Thanks for coming to the class.
Danielle, I loved it. Yeah, you'll have to let me know when there's another one on. Yeah, I think yeah, I need to make a bit more space in my life for some yoga, probably. But I think I feel like yoga probably helps with that, like equanimity, because exercise can be healing, but super stimulus exercise can be a bit of a cope, can't it?
Yeah.
It's just another drug.
Yeah.
If you could only do five habits for the rest of your life, what would they be and why?
So, like I said earlier, what's really important to me is strategies that are accessible, like irrespective of anything else, that are accessible and can be adapted by anybody. And because that's what I had to do, I had to start really small, and develop some strategies to keep me stable in life and grounded and here, basically. So first thing every single morning, lemon water. It helps me hydrate, and it gives me a little moment of peace and clarity every single morning. And when I was in the depths of despair in my grief, I used to drink a lot of tea, and it was almost like a bit of a ritual. Make a cup of tea. Something about providing somebody with a cup of tea, isn't there? Is like being English. That it's almost like, yeah, I care about you, I love you, have this cup of tea. So I used to drink so much tea, which was obviously brilliant because at least I was drinking something, but it was full of caffeine. So I found that swapping out the tea, and you know what? I also found that tea, even though I didn't drink it with sugar, I only had a bit of milk in it, it gave me enough sustenance to suppress my appetite as well. So I had to swap some of that tea out. So I had a warm lemon water. So I felt that it still was a bit of a ritual. It's still something warm. You're still doing in the kitchen, and then you can still sit with it and put your hands around that warm mug. But it's got so many more benefits, and you're hydrating yourself, and you're not having a lot of caffeine, which is going to impact
It's got some electrolytes in it as well, isn't it?
Yeah. So I would swap out, a bit of a morning ritual. Give yourself a lemon water every day for so many benefits, especially when you're grieving and you're not looking after yourself and you're dehydrated, drinking too much caffeine as well, because your sleep is interrupted, your endocrine system's interrupted, you have a lot of cortisol and adrenaline. So lemon water instead of caffeinated drinks. Second one is breath work, and again, start simple. Even if you just start to notice the breath, because when you're bereaved and in grief, we tend to breathe very shallow, rapid, and breathing is
Danielle.
Yeah.
Sorry, you just broke up. I couldn't hear you for like a good 10 seconds. Are you onto another habit?
I'm on to breath work. Number 2, breath work.
Okay. Right. Hopefully it doesn't cut out again. Just start that one again. Sorry.
Second habit I would recommend is breath work. I'd start small again, just start to notice the breath. You tend to breathe very shallow and superficially and quite fast. And you'll know this, Jason, breathing is a two-way street. How we feel affects how we breathe, and how we breathe affects how we feel. So breath can be a quick way to feeling a sense of safety. So start to deepen the breath, and even, just again, it's helping calm and switch on the parasympathetic nervous system. Breath work has been transformative for me. In fact, when I first started doing breath work, Jason, I think because I breathed up here for so long.
Hey guys, unfortunately we lost Danielle at the end there. I think she had a issue with a device and it stopped recording. So I wanted to make sure this episode went out, so I'm going to still publish it anyways, with it being Bereaved Parents Week. So I'm going to tell you her 5 habits anyway. So she already went through lemon water, and then breath work. So she talked about the importance of just noticing your breath. It doesn't have to be anything fancy necessarily, but just noticing if you are like shallow breath or breathing fast or anything like that. And then that will give you an indication into where your nervous system is at and how it is feeling. So then you can do things like just slowing your breath down, being more present with it, breathing through your nose, etc. That's a simple thing that you can do. Her third one was stillness. So that's cultivating. I talk about stillness a lot, to be fair. Cultivating that sort of space away from the noise, allowing things to become still so that you can process things, so things can come to the surface. So that may be like a quiet space in the house, an area that you go to just be with yourself. It could be taking a walk without headphones, meditation, all that kind of stuff. So I would also recommend that. Number 4 is, no surprise, was yoga. That's been very important to Danielle, so she's definitely going to be keeping that. And then the last one, number 5, was I think she said community or loved ones, family, that kind of thing. So being surrounded by friends and family. And I think we had a discussion around it being a real skill to work out whether you need the stillness and the kind of solitude, or whether you need people around you, the community, the family and friends, and being the only way that you will actually develop that skill is probably to start with some form of stillness, to be able to realize what it is that you are requiring at that moment in time. So thank you very much to Danielle for coming on the show. I really enjoyed our chat, and it was beautiful how vulnerable she was. It was very moving. If you are going through your own grief journey, I wish you all the best, and please do reach out to Danielle. I'm sure she would love to help you. Her Instagram is breathe_and_bereave, which will also be in the show notes as well. So I highly recommend you go and check out her page. And until then, I will look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care.